Good morning/afternoon, whenever you're reading this. This is Spinelli. I'm going to read you chapters 8 and 9. So if you would please go ahead and open your books to page 89, and we are going to start with chapter 8. Ben is sitting in class the next morning, and Mrs. Kutcher is writing assignments on the board. The spelling words are there to be copied, but Ben's not interested. Last night, his mother found one of his favorite books, Amphibians of the World, when she was unpacking one of the boxes in his sister's room. Ben hugged it close to his chest, like a lost friend, then stayed up late reading and studying the photographs. He opens the book on his lap and leaves through the pages again. Spelling can wait. He turns to the section on frogs and toads in Costa Rica and finds the picture of the golden toad, whose skin is an absolutely brilliant golden orange. The book says the golden toad hasn't been seen for more than a decade. Scientists think it's extinct. Frogs are disappearing all over the world. Ben starts to draw a picture of the golden toad. His colored pencils are dull, so he gets up to sharpen them. Ryan follows him to the sharpener. "Ben," Ryan whispers. "Hey, Ben." "Yeah? This is for you." Ryan hands him an envelope. Ben's name is on the front, written carefully in large block letters. "You can open it now, but be kind of quiet," Ryan says. He's hopping back and forth from one foot to another, doing his crazy dance, waiting. Ben shrugs and opens the envelope. The card inside is the shape of a party hat. "I'm having my own party, like Danny's, but different. It's in a month. I'm giving you the invitation early so you can make sure to come." "Okay," says Ben. "It'll be cool. We're planning all this fun stuff. We have to have it on a Thursday because my mom works on the weekend. My sister will be there, but she promised not to bother us. And Mom says we can order pizza." Ryan pauses for a quick breath, then the words keep coming. "We'll have games and a movie. What movies do you like? What?" "Anything's fine," says Ben. The party's a month away and Ryan's already going crazy. "My mom says maybe your mom should call so we can get everything set." "Okay." Ben finishes sharpening his colored pencils and heads for his desk. Ryan grabs his sleeve. "She should call today, and Ryan, calm down. I got your invitation. I'm coming. My mom doesn't need to call." "Okay, yeah, I know. I just want to make sure because it'll be fun, okay?" Okay. Ryan turns and hops back to his desk. He careens into the seat, knocking his books onto the floor. Mrs. Kutcher looks up. "Ryan," she says, "please keep it down. Others are working." "Sure," he says. "Sorry." Ben sits down. Ryan is beaming at him, and the eye not hidden by the patch is dancing. Ben puts the invitation in his desk and goes back to drawing the golden toad. Before he knows it, Ryan is peering over his shoulder. "Cool, what's that?" "A toad," Ben says. He keeps it short, hoping Ryan will leave him alone. "Cool, it's yellow." "It's called a golden toad." "Can I see it?" Ben stares at Ryan, but being stared at doesn't bother him. "Please," Ryan says. Ben holds the book up. Ryan grabs for it but drops it. "Ryan," Ben says. The kid can be such a jerk. Ryan scrambles to pick it up and then starts flipping through the pages. "Cool! This is the coolest book! Cool!" "Ryan," Mrs. Kutcher's voice is sharp. "Are you doing your work?" "No, I'm looking at Ben's book. It's really cool." "Both of you come up here, please," she says. Ben gives Ryan a murderous look, but Ryan doesn't notice. He's already halfway to Mrs. Kutcher's desk. "You two both need to get to work. Neither of you can afford just sitting around while everyone else does what needs to be doing." "But I was trying to work," Ben says. "He's the one that was talking." "I just wanted to see the book," Ryan says. All right. Whatever happened, put the book away. You're supposed to be doing spelling." Ben starts to protest, but Mrs. Kutcher shakes her head, stopping him. "Please don't argue and just do your work." Ben goes back to his chair and sits there with his arms folded. He can hear Ryan trying to get his attention. Frankie Murley snickers. Ben doesn't look up. Right after he gets home from school the next day, Ben tosses his backpack onto the sofa and hurries into the backyard. He hikes down the trail, going past the marshy place where he caught the peeper. The sun is shining, and he goes deeper and deeper into the woods, farther than he's ever gone before. He's a bit nervous about finding his way back, but it seems like someone has made a trail there. It's faint, but he can follow it all right. Ben likes being alone. He'll turn back before he gets lost. The trail makes a sharp bend to the right, and Ben stops. It feels like he's been here before. About 20 yards ahead is another trail that leads past some rock outcrops and heads up a small hill. He takes a few steps and looks around. This is the path he and Mrs. Tibbets explored last Saturday. His family's land not only backs up to Mrs. Tibbets's property, the two places are connected by a system of trails. He hurries up the path and comes to the vernal pool. He sits on the big rock beside it for a moment, but he's too excited about his discovery to sit still. He jumps up and takes the path towards Mrs. Tibbets's house. Maybe he'll just knock on the door and say hi. The trail leads him to her backyard. The garage is right in front of him. Ben walks around to the driveway, but Mrs. Tibbets' car isn't there. He looks in the kitchen window. He can see dishes in the sink and jars and plates spread out on the counter, but no sign of her. When Ben turns away from the door, he sees a car pull into the driveway. It looks familiar. The door swings open, and as soon as he sees the red hair, he knows who it is. Mrs. Tibbets' sister-in-law. Ben can't escape. He just stands there on the walk as the woman heads towards him. "Oh," she says when she sees him. "Hi," Ben says. "Who are you?" "I'm Ben Maroney. I'm one of Mrs. Tibbets' students." The woman frowns. Ben looks at her and then instinctively thrusts out his hand. She looks at it and doesn't want to take it, but then she does. Her hand is dry and bony. "I'm Mrs. Tibbets' sister-in-law," she says. "Tabitha Turner. Where is she?" Ben shakes his head. "No one's home. I just came over to... sometimes I do work around the house for her." Tabitha Turner exhales with disgust. "Of course she's not here. What was I thinking? Just because she said she'd be here means absolutely nothing." She glances at her watch. "I don't have time for this." She looks at Ben like she's not sure why he's still there. I'll probably just go ahead and leave now." "Well, I can't wait around here any longer," Mrs. Turner says, heading back to the car. "The woods here are really nice," Ben says. "It's a nice place." The words are out of his mouth before he realizes what he is saying. Tabitha Turner stops in the driveway and turns around slowly. "Has she been talking to you about this land? What did she say to you?" "Nothing. She just took me on a walk through the woods and showed me all the things that are living around here." Tabitha Turner shakes her head again and blows air through her mouth in a violent burst. "Oh, that woman!" She gets in her car and Ben watches her pull out of the driveway. He goes back to the kitchen door and looks inside one more time. As he heads toward the woods, he spots the cage under the lean-to by the garage. He stops, then takes a few steps closer. There's no movement inside the cage. He approaches it and puts his face close to the wire. It's too dark in the little enclosure to see anything. Ben whistles, thinking he might wake whatever it is. "Hey," he says, and gives the cage a gentle shake. He still doesn't see anything, but he thinks he hears something move inside the closed-off part of the cage. Now he's really curious. "I won't bother them," he thinks. "I just want to get a look at what kind of snakes live in the cage." Ben looks around. I'm on page 96. Ben looks around. Thick grass grows in tall clumps, but he sees a stick about 2 feet long lying by the side of the garage. He picks it up and very carefully pushes it through the crack along the edge of the door. He manages to maneuver the stick into the small entrance to the enclosure, but he can't get it in far enough. There's too much of an angle. Now figuring this out has become a challenge. Ben forgets about Mrs. Tibbets' warning. He gives the cage another shake, but nothing happens. The cage door is held closed with a hasp. A twist tie, something you use on plastic bags, holds the hasp closed. If I open the door a tiny bit, Ben thinks, I can get the stick into the nesting area and move it around a little. Then I'll close the door quickly as soon as the snake shows itself. Ben carefully unwinds the tie on the hasp and takes it off, stuffing it into his jacket pocket. He tries to pull back on the door, but the cage is old and the door sticks a little. He gives it a harder yank and it pops open. There's still no movement from the closed-off area, so he slides the stick in along the floor, keeping the door open just enough for the width of the stick. He pushes it into the enclosure and moves it around. There's something in there. He tries to slide the stick underneath it and lift it a little. He doesn't want to poke it. Whatever it is, it's heavy and it moves against the stick. Then he sees it. A dark triangular head emerges from the hole in the closed-off area. Ben's heart starts thumping. It's definitely a poisonous snake, but he's not sure what kind. Its tongue flicks out, testing the air in the cage. The snake freezes at the entrance of the hidden part of the cage. Just as Ben is thinking he should close the cage door, he hears a car pull into the driveway. Mrs. Tibbets is back. He doesn't think it's possible for his heart to beat any faster, but it does. He pulls the stick out of the cage and slams the cage door, but it bounces back open. It's a little warped and it doesn't fit very well. Now the snake is slowly pulling itself out of the enclosure. Ben's mind races in a million different directions at once. With one hand, he digs in his pocket, feeling for the little tie that sealed the door, and with the other hand, he tries to force the cage shut. He hears the car door open and close. Ben knows that Mrs. Tibbets will come up the walkway between the garage and the house, and that she'll be able to see him there if she bothers to look over. He gives up searching for the twist tie and presses both hands flat against the wire of the door, trying to close it all the way. The snake glides around the side of the cage. Its skin is molted tan with dark brown stripes. Its underside a yellowish white. The tail part is dark with a rattle on the end. Ben breathes more quickly as he sees the size of the creature. 3 or 4 feet long and as thick around as his, sorry guys, hang on 1 second, as his forearm. He imagines it striking out and biting his hand. His heart pounds. Then he sees another triangular head emerge from the nesting area. There are 2 of them. Hello? Is someone there? He can't see Mrs. Tibbets, but she must have heard him. Ben's back is prickly with sweat and fear. He shoves the door as tight as it will go. His only hope is to distract Mrs. Tibbets and pretend that he's just gotten here, then come back in a minute and make sure the snake hasn't gotten out. With one last push on the door, Ben steps away from the cage and walks out into the wild circle, away from the garage, as if he's just come from the woods. He still can't see her. Hello? He calls out. Is that you, Mrs. Tibbets? He heads quickly toward the walkway, keeping a distance from the back of the garage where the cage is. Oh, Ben, what a surprise. Mrs. Tibbets is smiling. Ben waves and takes a quick glance at the cage. The door has swung wide open. But it's too late to do anything about that, at least right now. Hi, he says, hoping his voice doesn't sound too quivery. I was walking in back of my house and I found this trail and then I recognized where I was. Oh, how wonderful, Mrs. Tibbets said. She's holding 2 big bags of groceries. I thought there was a way through there, but it's been a long time since I explored that part of the wood. Here, hold these, please, while I unlock my back door. She hands Ben the bags of groceries while she fumbles with her keys. The cage is just out of view. Ben feels like he wants to throw up, but he has to stand there, calmly, pretending that nothing's wrong. Why don't you come in for just a minute, she asks as she opens the door. You can put the groceries over there. There's nothing Ben can do but walk in and put the bags on the counter. I ought to get back, he says, desperate to escape. Don't be silly. You came all this way. Stay for a minute. Let me see what I've gotten here for a quick snack. That would be great, Mrs. Tibbets, but I really have to go. My mom doesn't know where I am or anything. Well, all right, she says, and Ben makes a beeline for the door. Oh, wait, she says, I forgot. I've got something for you. Ben follows her out the door along the walkway, terrified she's going to walk toward the lean-to. He tries to think of something to do, some way to stop her, but she goes right to the garage, opens the door, and disappears into the dark coolness. Ben sticks his head in. The garage is piled high with things. You couldn't park a car in it if you had to. I saw it the other day and meant to give it to you, Mrs. Tibbets says as she squeezes between a pile of tools and a stack of boxes. Oh, here it is. She holds up a short-handled net. This should help you with those peepers. Thanks, Ben says. Half an hour ago, he would have been thrilled and eager to tell her that he had caught a peeper with his bare hands. Now he just wants to get away from here. That's great. I really have to go. All right, she says. I'll see you at school tomorrow. And remember, the night of the Spadefoot toads could happen any day now. I hope you'd still like to come. Yeah, sure, Ben says. He walks out of the garage with Mrs. Tibbets a few feet behind him. Instead of heading directly for the woods, Ben hangs back, praying that Mrs. Tibbets won't decide to go check the cage. Thanks a lot, he says. Mrs. Tibbets stands at her back door for a moment, waving at him, then steps inside and shuts it. Ben walks around to the side of the garage and stops and waits for a minute, then tiptoes back to the lean-to. The door to the cage is wide open. He sucks in a deep breath and walks over for a closer look. The snakes aren't in the outer area of the cage. He lets out his breath all at once, like he's been holding it for an hour. He glances around his feet for any glimpse of them, but tells himself they probably just slithered back into their nest. He fumbles in his pocket for the twist tie, shuts the door as tight as he can get it, then flaps down the hasp. His fingers are shaking. It's a struggle, but he finally manages to fasten it with the tie. Ben knows he should have checked to make sure the snakes were definitely in there, but he tears across the field and plunges into the woods. Frantic to get home, he barely even glances at the vernal pool. As he approaches the path that leads to his backyard, he realizes that he's gripping the net Mrs. Tibbets gave him. That is such a good chapter, isn't it? And isn't it funny how here we have him making another mistake, not really thinking about what he's doing and just wanting to be curious, and nobody was there to stop him, so he looked for the snakes. All right, turn the page. We're going to read chapter 9 too. It's just a few more pages, and we'll kind of see what happens after the cage and after the snakes. Chapter 9. The next day in class, Ben can barely look up at Mrs. Tibbets. He slumps down in his seat thinking about the snakes. He knows that snakes don't ordinarily strike people, at least if people leave them alone, but he can't help picturing them gliding out of the cage, lurking in the garden, ready to strike out if someone passes by. Someone like Mrs. Tibbets. He sits up straight and tries to concentrate on the class discussion, but he can't get those two triangular heads out of his mind. When Ben gets home, he has a snack, then goes to his room and shuts the door. He doesn't know what else to do but work on his homework. He stares at his geography assignment. An outline of the report is due tomorrow, but Ben hasn't been able to get started on it. Now it's the last thing he wants to do. The desert seems a million miles away. The phone rings. Ben runs into the hall and answers it. Ben? This is Mrs. Tibbets. Ben is too stunned to speak. He stares at the wall. Ben? Oh, right, hi. I need to ask you something. Okay. Ben's heart is racing. When you came by yesterday afternoon, did you notice anything about the cage behind my garage? What? Ben is fighting for time. The cage behind my garage, the one under the lean-to? Now Ben's mind is racing too. He knows he should confess, but he just can't. No, I didn't notice anything. Well, someone apparently opened the cage and then fastened it shut again. She stops talking for a moment, leaving space for him to say something if he wants to. Ben, the snakes in that cage are dangerous. Somehow they got out. Wow. Ben's voice is barely above a whisper. He feels terrible about the lie, but he just can't bring himself to explain everything to her. What kind of snakes were there, he asks. Rattlesnakes, timber rattlers. That's why I asked you to stay away from them. Rattlesnakes? Ben tries to sound surprised. Yes, I thought maybe you were looking at them when you were here. No, says Ben. Oh, this is horrible. I shouldn't have kept them. Where did you get them? Ben tries to sound like he's just interested and doesn't know anything about them. They're very rare around here, Mrs. Tibbet says. My husband was licensed to capture and move snakes that had lost their habitat. He was going to transfer those rattlers, and then She pauses for a minute, and Ben knows she's thinking about her husband dying. She takes a breath and goes on. I should have done something with them. Now, who knows what happened? Maybe there's a hole in the cage. They got out somehow. Maybe someone stole them, Ben says. It's hard to imagine. No one knew they were there. Oh, what have I done? You didn't do anything, Ben says. Yes, I did. I kept them and I shouldn't have. Will they be all right? I don't know. The teacher's voice sounds so sad that Ben's throat tightens. It's too early in the year for them to be out, and they usually can't adapt to a new habitat. This is all my fault. Maybe they'll be okay, Ben says, trying to cheer her up, and himself. Thanks. Then, before Ben can hang up, she asks, Is your mother there? Ben freezes. Why does she want my mom? Yeah, he stammers. May I speak with her? Ben feels sick. Sure, just a minute. He calls his mom. Who is it? She asks. It's Mrs. Tibbets. He hands her the phone and walks away, but as soon as he's around the corner, he stops to listen. His mother says hello and then falls silent. She's quiet for a long time. He sticks his head around the corner and sees her just standing there with the phone to her ear. Are you sure? She said. Then, after a pause, she talks for a while, saying how much Ben has always liked the outdoors and wild things, and how she appreciates Mrs. Tibbet's concern. She hangs up and sees Ben watching. I wish you'd told us about those snakes, she said. Ben nods. If his mother had asked him whether he let them out, he knows he'll have to tell her the truth. Well, she says, I'm relieved you didn't have anything to do with it. She sounded very upset. His mom heads back to the kitchen. Ben stands there. He's missed his chance to let the truth come out. Sinking deeper and deeper into a hole, he feels worse than ever. He goes back to his desk and stares at the blank wall. The desert is 2 million miles away now. When he closes his eyes, he sees the snakes. He wonders where they are tonight. Ben does his best to avoid Mrs. Tibbets in school that week and the next. When he's in her class, he does work but doesn't raise his hand. Twice she asks him after class if he's managed to catch a peeper and if he wants to come to check on the vernal pool again. Both times he shakes his head and hurries out of the room. It's not like he's lost interest in the toads, though. He spends a lot of time in the woods behind her house. His parents must notice, because one day his father came home with a new pair of waders. This is to save your sneakers, he said. They fit him better than the ones that he used at Mrs. Tibbets' house, and he likes the feeling of being waterproof. Using the net Mrs. Tibbets gave him, Ben snares a few American toads, but he still doesn't manage to catch another peeper. He decides to keep one of the toads, and with the money he saved, to buy a terrarium from the pet store. After fixing it up with some mud and a couple of plants, he settles the toad into his new habitat. The following Thursday afternoon, Ben is sitting at his desk at home trying to get started on his geography project. His mom has laid down the law. No more wandering in the woods until he's made progress on his report. His sister is always playing with Rory, Ryan's sister. The house is quiet. He has no excuse for putting this off any longer. He stares at the report guidelines. He picks up a pencil and taps it on his notebook. He loves the desert. Why can't he get started on this report? Frustrated, he looks around the room until his gaze comes to rest on a book about amphibians he brought home from the school library. He picks it up and starts leafing through it. He glances over at the terrarium. The toad is crouched in the corner. It doesn't look happy. 4 glass walls and some dirt plants don't make much of a home for something that's used to living outside in the world. He skims through the section of the book on building a terrarium for amphibians, looking for ideas. Just then, the doorbell rings. "I'll get it," he yells, slamming the book shut. He turns down the hallway to the front door, happy for an excuse to escape his work. He opens the door and finds his sister Agatha standing there. Ryan is just behind her, holding a book in his hands. "The door was locked, you bozo," Agatha says and shoves past him. "It was not. Try turning the knob for once," Ben says back to her. Ben turns to Ryan. "Hi," he says. "Hi," Ryan says. "Mom and Rory are waiting in the car, so I can't stay. I brought your book back, and when I was at the library, I found these books about amphibians and reptiles, too. I thought you might want to see them." He's so excited that he practically throws the books at Ben, and they fall to the floor between them. "Whoops," he says, and he scrambles to pick them up. "I took them out of the library in my library card, and my mom said we could bring them over. You can just give them back to me when you're done." Ben helps Ryan with the books, and Ryan just keeps talking. "They're not as cool as your book. Your book is the best. I've read some of the chapters twice already, and..." Ryan's mother honks the horn and waves for Ryan to hurry. "Sorry, gotta go." "Thanks," Ben says. Ryan smiles his loopy smile. "See you tomorrow," he says. On his way to the car, he turns back and calls out, "Oh yeah, I put a picture I drew in one of the books. It's for you." "Okay," Ben says. He waves goodbye as Ryan's mom backs the car out of the driveway. Ben looks down at the stack of books in his arms. Still standing in the doorway with the door open, he opens up the top book. Between the first 2 pages is a colored pencil drawing. It's beautiful. Much better than anything Ben's ever done. He didn't even know Ryan could draw. It's a picture of a bright orange creature perched on a rock by a stream. Above it, Ryan had written in large block letters, "Golden toad, endangered or extinct. Handle with care." Underneath the picture of the toad, Ryan has written an inscription. "For Ben, your friend, Ryan." Ben's embarrassed. He hasn't done anything to deserve Ryan's friendship. He barely even talks to him. He takes the books to his room. He searches through the desk drawer for the tape dispenser and sticks Ryan's picture on the wall above his desk. Then he sits at the desk and looks at the library books Ryan brought. He opens the biggest book first, the one with the glossy colored photograph of a bright red frog on the cover. He thumbs through, looking at all the different species of frogs and toads, and then he stops on the page and stares at the photograph of a small, smooth-skinned olive green toad. The yellow stripes curve across its back. Its eyes are bright. The edges of the eyes are golden, and the pupils are vertical, up and down, not horizontal like other toads. A diagram shows the projections on the hind feet, that they look like shovels. He reads the caption, "Eastern Spadefoot, now rare and endangered in several states." It's the toad Mrs. Tibbets told him about, the kind that appears every year in her vernal pool. Compared to some of the other species in this book, it doesn't look like much, but Mrs. Tibbets has made it sound like a treasure, like a special secret that only the 2 of them know about. An endangered species right around the corner from where he lives? Ben thinks about the toads out there, buried way under the ground, waiting for the rain. He'd love to see them when they come out for that one night. But that would mean talking to Mrs. Tibbets, and that's something he can't imagine doing, not after what happened with the snakes. His guilt sits in the pit of his stomach like a big, cold stone. He reads all there is about the Spadefoot, and it only makes him feel worse. "Ben," his mother calls, "it's time for dinner." He looks at the Spadefoot one more time and closes the book. He'll have to work on his report later. Oh, goodness. Such an awesome 2 chapters. Lots to talk about. So tomorrow we will spend time answering questions and talking about all that happened in these 2 chapters. I will talk to you later. Have a great day.